4 Short Dogman Encounter Campfire Tales. I nearly jogged into a dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a Pittsburgh dogman story for you. It's not even a Pittsburgh region story. This is a story from Pittsburgh itself, involving me almost running face first into a Pennsylvania dogman. When I first relocated to Pittsburgh from Atlanta, people kept telling me that life is the same everywhere, and I'd adapt to Pittsburgh like a fish to water. I have come to love it, and it's still where I live, but Pennsylvania has a way of throwing you curveballs. It's like the place keeps you awake by continually making you question if you're still in bed dreaming. In the case of my dogman encounter, that dream was a nightmare. It had always been my morning routine to jog before I moved here, and at first I had some trouble finding a jogging route in Pittsburgh that I felt comfortable with. Each one I ran left me with a feeling that I should keep looking. So one day I wound up driving over to run at the Moses Carper Trail, which is in Pittsburgh itself, not all too far from where our offices were in those days. So when I read the name Moses Carper Trail online, I pictured a calm, relaxing retreat into nature. It is that, but the beginning of the course for me that morning involved jogging alongside Riverview Avenue in this extra biking or hiking lane. When the traffic was thin, it was nice. When cars drove by, I breathed in exhaust fumes. It took me some time to fall into rhythm and to begin to enjoy being there. I started to kind of zone out on this beautiful but chilly morning. Just when I was about where the two gray-haired people are in this image here, a huge bipedal hairy beast came flying up the hill to my left, moving quickly from my left to my right, but also directly toward me and in my face. It happened so fast that when I moved my head to see him approaching, I was already looking at the hairy chest of this extremely tall, caveman-like being. He ran past me, but only barely past me, so close that he nearly knocked me right over without touching me. I barely stopped myself in time to avoid us banging into each other, but I got a good whiff of the fella as he zipped past, because he was so large and moving so quickly that he created his own breeze. I was thinking, wow, I nearly just got stomped on by a Bigfoot, but then I turned and watched the thing race across the road, leap up and grab the pole over there, use it to swing itself up higher onto the hill, and then run over the top in a few long steps, disappearing over the other side. While I had my breath taken away by such remarkable feats of athleticism, I was equally surprised and stunned to make out the shape and silhouette of the beast. This was no Sasquatch. It wasn't any kind of bear either. It had too thin a torso for a bear and too long a snout for a Sasquatch. Bigfoot don't have dog ears sticking up on top of their heads either, last I heard. Also, I saw this thing from behind, and it had a tail. Sort of a dog tail, but also sort of a fox tail, maybe? I'd almost say the animal was some kind of bulked up super wolf, but wolves run around on 4 feet, and this one ran quite quickly, using only his hind legs. It looked more like a wolf than any other kind of animal, but of course, it didn't exactly resemble anything I'd ever seen before. I think the Olympics should recruit him if he turns out to be some form of human. I never saw such an acrobatic performance in all my life. When people ask me what's different about Pittsburgh when compared to other places I've lived, I tell them that no other city has a 9-foot-tall upright running dog knock you down the first time you jog there. Sometimes they laugh when I say that. Other times they just sort of give me funny looks. I don't try as hard as I used to make sense to people. Not since the morning when I nearly jogged into a dogman. I saw Dogman looking at my sleeping baby. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I grew up in the city, and it was a hard childhood. I told myself that if I ever had a kid, I would make sure that he or she grew up out in the country. I was true to my word, but I found out that there's danger everywhere you go. On our very first night in the country, my wife and I saw a Dogman looking at our sleeping baby. The two of us had been married for 3 years when Martha, not her real name, told me that she was expecting. When I was able to find us a private home in the country to live in, it felt like we were on a hot winning streak. But the Dogman was already out there, waiting in the wings, preparing to turn everything cold. Neither of us had ever lived in a house before. We both grew up in apartments and lived in one since we got married. Out in the country, though, sometimes you can rent a whole house for the same price as a city apartment. In our case, the house was way cheaper than our last apartment, so it really was an exciting and hopeful time for us. The home we rented was in the general vicinity of Bonita, Wisconsin, set back a ways from civilization in the woods. I tell you, that first day, we thought we were in heaven. But by nightfall, we realized that for us, this was hell. The baby was sleeping in the crib we placed by the window in the room we were making into our living room, and my wife and I ate dinner in the next room. We could hear the baby start to cry, and the two of us joked about whose turn it was to respond. When I finally got up to see what his problem was, I was greeted with a sight that would give nightmares to any parent who ever lived. I saw a big old hairy, scary monster man right outside that window, and he was looking at my precious son like he was a rack of ribs hanging in a butcher shop window. My baby was screaming because somehow, some way, he knew before the rest of us that a large, hairy predator was writing him in as the daily special on his personal menu. I'm going to tell you what I saw, and if you're anything like my in-laws, you're going to accuse me of exaggerating. Or, what's the word they use again? Oh yeah, hyperbole. As far as I can tell, hyperbole means I get upset about something, then they get hyper about bullying me over it. But no matter what fancy words you use to pick on me, this is still what I saw looking at my baby boy. It was like a dog head, up on top of a gorilla's body. It had crazy eyes, like it was more excited to see that boy than anything else. Do you know the way some dogs like St. Bernards can have that eye gunk under their eyes? Well, this big slobbering monster had eye gunk coming out of its eyes, mucus coming out of its nose, saliva dripping from its long, panting tongue, and probably some other disgusting things I was too nauseated to notice. I could also see one of its paws splayed out, looking like Freddy Krueger's glove with the knives in it. Oh, and another thing. His eyes glowed. Homeboy's eyes glowed this sick reddish color, like he'd been smoking some Gorilla Glue all night long before going window shopping. This was something like a dog, but it was not a dog. It was like a monster from an old double feature at the drive-in. This was like something that would have been shot in black and white. Things like that aren't supposed to happen in real life. And as I realized what I was seeing and how messed up it was, the ear-piercing scream of my wife behind me let me know that I wasn't imagining that creature out there. She was now jumping up and down and bouncing around as though there were an invisible force field preventing her from going into the room to rescue her son. She wanted to go to him, but the image of that werewolf thing was too terrifying for her to take one step forward. It was going to have to be me saving our son, I realized, but I had no plan of attack. When something like that happens, you never know how you're going to react. In this case, I went savage ape man, screaming and waving my arms as I ran toward the window and my baby boy. I needed to get that baby out of that crib and into my arms, and I needed that dog-headed monster to remain on the other side of that glass window. I won't say that my crazy display frightened the creature, but it did confuse him enough that he took a half step backward, and I grabbed our son. I ran away, deeper into the small house, and when I looked back, the Dogman was already somewhere else. We've moved around a lot since then. It seems that no matter where you go, it's never going to be perfect. But the lowest moment of my life was that time that I saw Dogman looking at my sleeping baby. I saw Dogman on the shoreline, or the Davis Island Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was a young man, I used to take my little boat out into the water at night. It was a foolish thing to do. I would avoid doing that at all costs now that I am fully grown. Why? I live down on the Mississippi River, the border between Mississippi and Louisiana. It's a swampy part of the country, and it's a dangerous one too. Why, one night, as I went out into the darkness in search of adventure, I saw a real-life Mississippi rougarou, larger than life, walking on what passes for land over on Davis Island. There's this tributary of the big river just to the west of Yokina that leaves the main part and sort of runs a circle around Davis Island, then spills back out into the Mississippi. That's the narrow little passageway of water I stupidly rowed my boat into on that night so many years back. Just to be clear, my boat did have a motor on it, but I tried not to use it at night, except in emergencies. I had oars, and I rowed. I liked it quiet, and I kept it quiet. So there I was, rowing my way around Davis Island in a leisurely manner, when something caught my eye on the land. No, not the Dogman, but a rabbit or a hare. Something small and furry with long ears was bouncing up and down in the grass over there. Then, in one quick second, a big, and I mean large, dog spouted a big long row of barks and woofs as it ran in a frantic manner toward that rabbit. Both creatures stirred dust and dirt in the air as this race they were having was not for practice. I saw them both go down, but I only saw the huge dog come up, and he had succeeded in catching his game. It was one of those moments of life and death that you witness by accident, and then you can't unsee. It was jarring, but it was the way of nature. Feeling a complicated mix of emotions, I watched the predator and his prey from what felt like the safety of my boat. And then, that big doggy noticed me watching him, and I could hear the growl all the way from on land. And then, the alarmed and annoyed canine did something else to demonstrate his displeasure at me watching him. He rose up and up and up into the air until I saw him, all 12 or 13 feet of him, standing up bipedally on shore, watching my boat drift slowly by. When that dog had been crouched down, I felt as though I were as far from him as the catcher is from the center fielder in a baseball game. When he stood up, though, I felt so close that this big canine could probably reach out and grab me without having to take even one more step in my direction. This was not an upright dog that stood with its front paws bent in prayer in front of it. This was a kind of upright dog that stood with its shoulders held back, that stood with its wide and massive humanoid chest thrust out proudly. I'll be honest, this dog was more of a man than I was, or am. I know I gave you the sermon about how I dislike loud sounds in the night, but I kicked up plenty of noise pollution that evening, as it felt like it took me 87 tries to get that boat motor running again. Just the extreme noise of it seemed to make the Dogman take his rabbit elsewhere. But I tell you, I didn't feel safe the rest of that night. Even after I got home, I locked every door and window, and I pulled all my shades shut. It was over a week before I felt safe just walking around the neighborhood. I've heard stories about the dogs and wolves that stand up. I've heard that some of them are really men in disguise. Brujos, you know. If you insult one of them, sometimes they can take it personally and follow you home. View you as their new enemy. It's been over 20 years and I've yet to see that old Dogman a second time. I like to think he forgot about the incident years ago. Then again, maybe I've never run into him again because I don't do foolish, stupid things like row around Davis Island in the middle of the night for no reason anymore. I learned my lesson from the night when I saw Dogman on the shoreline. The Dogman behind the famous haunted house. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Back in 2020 when things went crazy, my wife and I had conversations with relatives and decided to rent a house from a cousin. That meant we got to move all the way back from Northern California to West Virginia, where I am originally from. We decided to pare down our belongings and only take what we could fit in our 2015 Volkswagen Golf Sportwagen. My wife Margaret asked me if we could take a side trip to visit the Sallie house in Atchison, Kansas, which is supposed to be haunted by demonic presences. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Not because I'm interested in that kind of stuff, but because it's sometimes a little too easy to convince Margaret that something supernatural is going on. Some people are prone to be skeptical, and others are prone to believe. I am the former, and my lovely wife Margaret is the latter. Margaret, as it turned out, was nervous about visiting this location. She had watched programs on television about it, and she told me that she just sort of wanted to look at it, drive past, see how she felt. They have tours, which I think may have still been running back then, maybe not. This was still pretty early on with the whole 2020 madness. We never took the tour in either case, because of what happened when we drove around the neighborhood. You see, it was behind the Sallie house that we saw the Dogman. Not on this side, it was the other side around. I'll try to show you on Google Street View, if I can. First, let's drive down the street it's located on, which I believe is 2nd. It's right smack dab in the middle of the block, so I wonder how the neighbors feel about it. Would you enjoy having a house haunted by demons from hell next door? Or would that be a bummer? I think this is the place. It's the White House here. You can sort of see how it's just an ordinary looking house, with an ordinary looking backyard. It seemed pleasant to me, but as we sat in the car staring at it, my wife Margaret started acting sick, like she was gonna faint, or get nauseous, or both. She told me to drive, so I did, around the corner where I parked and opened the windows a bit to let the fear and bad vibes out, and let some fresh air in. Now, I'm not clear exactly where we were, but it was around the corner and behind the houses where Margaret was calming down that I saw the Dogman monster. It was standing there, unclothed like an animal, but appearing as a man with a canine head. I didn't want to point it out to Margaret, because I didn't want her getting upset all over again. But she saw the expression on my face, and she knew something was wrong. She turned around, and when she gasped, I knew that she could see that thing too. I asked her to describe what she was seeing, and she described just what I saw. It was a dark, hairy, or furry animal, standing up like a giant meerkat. It appeared to be staring off into the direction of the backyard of the Sallie house. It was not paying attention to us until Margaret asked me to get us out of there. Maybe it heard her, or maybe it caught the sense of fear, because that giant meerkat turned to look in our direction and it looked a lot more like an American Werewolf in London than anything cute. To be honest, there's a werewolf movie called Dog Soldiers that looked more like this creature. It was sort of an upright walking dog with a bigger and more solid frame and musculature. Like a dog that had been working out with weights while serving its time, you know? It had a face like something out of a caveman's nightmare, all flashing eyes and 6-inch long teeth. I did as my wife asked, and I got that car started quickly. Behind us, I watched the Dogman take a few steps out into the street just to make sure we were leaving. Now I know I said I'm a skeptic, but we both saw this thing, and we both agree it was really there. It was in a suburban neighborhood, a heavily populated place for a creature like that to be. There are some trees behind the Sallie house, and a park down the hill by the water. Not exactly a forest, hardly a natural habitat for an apex predator. What if Dogman, or at least the one we saw, is some kind of a haunting? What if it isn't just a natural animal, but something more or other? I suppose if we must think of it as flesh and blood and an ordinary creature like you and me, it might have swum over from Missouri. The Sallie house is very, very close to the Missouri River, which forms the border between Kansas and Missouri over there. As I mentioned, the Kansas side is suburban, but I neglected to point out that the Missouri side has a lot of undeveloped natural land on it. Possibly the Dogman wandered over from there by accident. My wife Margaret feels that whether the creature was a spirit or an animal, it was an evil one, because it was drawn somehow to the Sallie house. But then I reminded her that we, too, had been drawn from afar to witness the Dogman behind the famous haunted house. Experiencing the post-holiday blahs? Need something to get your blood pumping again? Then check out the Dog Days of January, a new Dogman story each day for the rest of the month here on Scary Stories NYC. Yvonne Marshall on the Lizard. She's fun in the summer and fun in a blizzard. We like her lots, not only partial, and that's because she's Yvonne Marshall. Hey, it's your old pal Bigfoot here, broadcasting from the Lizard Lighthouse in Cornwall, where I was hoping to get to party with today's executive producer herself. I've been checking in at all the swanky local nightclubs, but it seems she's always left just before I got there. If you see Yvonne, please tell her that in exchange for her kind donations to keep our channel going, Yvonne Marshall on the Lizard has access to our secret uncensored scary Dogman stories. Stories that are far too wild to ever tell on this channel. Also, please remind Yvonne that she has access to our over 21 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories as well. And I hope Yvonne reminds you that you too can have these and other perks by either joining our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com or by doing what Yvonne Marshall on the Lizard did and clicking that join link under this or any of our videos. And now, here's international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman to fill in any details I may have left out. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, You need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal Subscribers Club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal Club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.